Everybody, looks like everyone's taking their seats, and I'll ask Ms. Inger to please call the roll.
Chairman Klein,
Here.
Mr. Lovell,
Here.
Mr. Landry,
Here.
Mr. Garrett,
Here.
Mr. Brown,
Here.
Mr. Whitty, Mr. Bro, Ms. Goodson, Mr. Broussard, Mr. Tingle, Mr. Ince, Ms. Gotro, Mr. Burke, Ms. Salings Gorman, Mr. Bubrick, Mr. Bourgeois, Mr. Hidalgo, Mr. Montilago, Ms. Cormier, Mr. Segrera, Ms. Representative Zarang. You have a quorum.
Okay, Inger, just Mr. Tingle texted that he's running a few minutes late, so just
Okay.
note when he walks in, please. All right, members, if we could have a motion to approve the agenda. I don't have any changes at this time. A motion by Mr. Bourgeois, second by Mr. Hidalgo. Public comment. Any objection to the motion? Motion carries. Approval of the minutes from our last meeting that Inger circulated. We've got a motion by Ms. Cormier, a second by Ms. Gorman. Any public comments? Any objection? Motion approved. Any old business or announcements, members? I actually don't have any today. So all of our announcements will be coming in our presentations. So there are some announcements, so I just ask the members of the audience to pay close attention to the presentation, as well as the board members. And with that, we're going to call up our Executive Director, Mr. Haas, for an implementation update.
All right. Well, good morning, members of the board. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. As always, it is a pleasure to be here with you today, talk with you a little bit about CPRA's implementation program, a couple of the projects that we have in the works right now, both of which are nearing completion of construction. We're happy to report and to talk with you a little bit about some of the trends we're all seeing, of course, as it relates to costs associated with implementing our program. So, as always, we'll start with kind of a high-level overview of what's happening at CPRA. We have currently 104 projects active at CPRA. 36 of those are in construction, 60 of those in engineering and design, and 8 of those are in the planning phases right now. So if you look at the construction column there, about 14 of those projects are hurricane protection projects. An example of one of those projects would be the North Lafourche Levee Improvements Project. 11 projects are marsh creation projects. An example of those would be the Lake Leary Marsh Creation Project. And one of you all asked a question a while back about this other category. So the project that is the other in the construction column there is the Bayou Lafourche Pump Capacity Improvement Project. Of the 60 projects in engineering and design, 7 of those are hurricane protection projects. Again, an example there would be the Sunset Levee Upper Barataria Levee Improvement Project. 32 marsh creation projects are in engineering and design. One of those is near Calcasieu Lake. It's the Long Point Bayou Marsh Creation Project. We are excited to hopefully move that project in the next month or two over into the construction column there. And again, if you look at the other category there, an example of a project that's in that cell would be the East Bank Sediment Transport Corridor, which would be sort of analogous to the Long Distance Sediment Pipeline Project. Its goal would be to dredge sediment from the Mississippi River, send it east into the Breton Basin to shore up the land bridge in that portion of the state. Of the 8 projects in planning, 6 of those are hurricane protection projects, and another example of that would be the St. Tammany Risk Reduction Project. So moving on, I want to talk about a couple specific projects, the first of which is the Atchafalaya Delta WMA Campground Improvement Project. This is located adjacent to Belle Isle, south of Berwick, near Morgan City, Louisiana. You can see a January of 2019 picture. This is the campground at the Wax Lake portion of the Atchafalaya Delta WMA. There are two subdeltas there. You all are probably aware of the Wax Lake and Big Delta, or the Atchafalaya Delta. This is on the western side, the Wax Lake side. And you can see some of the improvements that have already been made in July of this year with the bulkhead regraded campground. And just for a point of reference, in the picture on the left, you see a restroom facility kind of in the upper left-hand corner of the photograph. That same facility is in the center of the photograph on the right-hand side of this slide. But this is a $3 million project. It's being funded through Natural Damage Resource Assessment Funds. These are BP dollars. It is intended to restore and improve access for recreational users to the resources of the coast. This is, I can tell you from personal experience, this is a heavily used area. Literally hundreds of people on the opening weekend of duck season will use this campground, and thousands of people throughout the year, both during waterfowl season, bird watchers, and fishers will use this location throughout the year as well. So the project consists of about a 1,200 foot long bulkhead. An 80-foot jetty will also be incorporated here. There'll be material dredged from the channel in front of the campground, and you can see some of that has been placed and graded behind the bulkhead on that picture, on the right-hand side of the slide. There'll also be 2 new 40-foot docks that will ease and access to the campground area, also improve safety. Of course, you can see the sort of eroded shoreline that folks are having to pull their boats up to, get out of their boats and onto the campground in that photograph on the left-hand side. And the docks can be used for fishing as well. So we expect completion of this project and demobilization of the contractor to take place just next month. So I did not mention, but this land is owned and managed by the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, our sister agency that also sits on the board here. We're certainly happy to partner with them in implementing this project for the citizens of Louisiana. As always, jobs created by this project, I like to report those, and these are non-governmental jobs. So these are folks not like me that work for the government, but private sector jobs. About 30 or so are created through the implementation and construction of this project. The contractors that you see that have worked on this project listed on the slide here, All South Consulting and Engineers is headquartered in Metairie. Berry Brothers Contractors is headquartered in Berwick, just upriver from this project. And then APS Engineering and Testing also has worked on this project. They're headquartered here in Baton Rouge. So just another example of a project for Louisiana citizens being constructed by Louisiana citizens, and something that we're very proud of. Next project I want to talk with you about is the Parody Canal Gate. This is located in Parody, right near Baton. In St. Charles Parish. You can see sort of the before or early stages of the project in October of 2020 on the left-hand side of the slide there, and then July of this year, just recently, this photograph was taken. You can see features of the project that are on the ground and very much nearing completion. So what you see there, kind of the monolith, is about a 14.5 foot vertical lift gate. Risk reduction feature. This project also includes tie-ins to the existing levees, an extension of an access road from the Magnolia Ridge pump station as well, and some erosion control and stability features adjacent to the structure. So this floodgate will help prevent flooding through the Parody Canal on the west bank of St. Charles Parish and protect assets worth about $12.5 billion in that portion of our state. So you see a video, some drone footage of the project under construction here, many of the features that I just discussed. This is about almost $4.5 million project. It's being funded through the Restore Parish Matching Program and Restore Parish Direct distribution component of, again, BP oil spill dollars through the Restore Council. We expect that this project will be done very, very soon, and it will be fully functional this hurricane season. The Magnolia pump station I mentioned was on the right-hand side of the screen there. So, again, about 50 jobs were created. Non-government jobs were created through the implementation of this project. This project also represents partnerships throughout all levels of government, from the Restore Council, the U.S. Department of Treasury, obviously CPRA, the state of Louisiana, and St. Charles Parish. And Burke Kleinpeter Incorporated is a New Orleans-based firm, did most of the work advancing this project to construction. So again, happy to report that. And lastly, and at the risk of ending on a bit of a sour note, I did want to take a little time to kind of discuss some of the trends that we're seeing as it relates to construction costs, our project costs, and the trends that we're seeing in the bids that we're receiving for those projects that we want to implement. So obviously this, while it's maybe not great news, it's not really new news to any of us. Anybody that's bought a gallon of milk or a gallon of gas or is trying to implement a program for your agency, or in your business knows that costs have been going up. They've been going up dramatically, and there's a number of reasons for that. Of course, supply chain issues. We've all talked about that over the last couple of years, but volatility in material prices, labor has been tough to acquire and get, and of course, fuel prices, as I just mentioned, whether it's diesel or gasoline, have spiked in the recent past. And so just by way of example, 3 bids have been advertised by CPRA this year. The total project bids for those 3 projects, if you look at just the low bid, it's about $62 million. Our estimate for those projects total was $49 million. And so you see that represents a difference of about 25%. So our bids came in 25% essentially over what we were expecting and what we had been planning for. One might argue that perhaps looking at the average bid might be a better way to sort of gauge what the market thinks something should cost. And so I ran those numbers quickly. It's not on the slide, but if you look at the average bids received for those 3 projects, it was about $73 million. That represents almost a 50% increase over what the engineer's estimate was to implement those projects. So again, this is not new. We know our sister agencies, our local partners, and the federal government are all experiencing these. In conversations with the Corps of Engineers, we understand that they have had some dredging projects recently advertised that they were not able to award because the cost came in too high. In talking with our Department of Transportation and Development, bids that they've received from January just through May of this year have experienced an annualized inflation rate of 103%. So just tremendous. And then working with many of our partners, a couple of examples. One, the Bayou Lafourche Freshwater District recently advertised a project that was anticipated to cost about $65 million. The low bid came in at $96 million. Nearly a 50% increase. Another example, recently the town of Grand Isle advertised a bid for a rock job along Caminada Pass there. That was anticipated to cost about $6.5 million. The low bid came in at almost $9 million. So again, about a 40% increase there. So those are just a few tangible examples that I'm aware of. I know you all probably have a handful or many perhaps examples that you're dealing with in your own businesses. So what's the upshot of this? Well, one, we don't expect this trend to change really anytime soon, particularly for projects that we're constructing that are material intensive. So things that require cement, asphalt, rocks I mentioned earlier, and certainly steel has been all over the place. Just another example, again, we're all seeing this in our personal lives at the gas pump, but if you look at the cost of diesel from the first quarter of 2021, there's been about an 85% increase in that cost. So what cost, a year or two ago, $2.30 or so for a gallon for diesel is now costing well over $5 a gallon for diesel. Most of our projects require a lot of fuel. Certainly many of our projects are dredging projects. The fuel costs associated with those can push up to about half of the cost of the project. And so you can imagine with an 85% increase what that might do to the overall cost of the projects that we're implementing. So what does this mean? What does this really mean to the coastal program? And really, at its most basic, what it means is that we aren't able to deliver today what we were able to deliver in terms of benefits even just a year ago, really 6 months ago. Whether that's an acre of marsh or miles of levee, no matter how you measure it, it results in a reduction of the benefits that we're able to deliver, of course, to the citizens of the state of Louisiana. We are doing some things, and we're strategizing in some ways to mitigate some of these impacts, of course. We're not going to stop doing our work. We want to continue to deliver projects for the good of the state of Louisiana, and we will continue to do that. And so there are things that we can do in terms of structuring our bids, using alternates, for example, that can assure we can hopefully get to a place where we can award a bid on a project. And if trends change and costs come in lower, perhaps we're able to award some of those alternates and make those projects bigger, essentially, and deliver more as it relates to that. There are also clauses, I think, that we can include in our contracts, and we're investigating this right now as we're moving forward, and we'll be awarding more or advertising more bids this year, of course. And so are there clauses that we can include in our contracts that can shift some of the risk perhaps from the contractors to the owner or to CPRA? So fuel adjustments, material adjustments, and so forth, things of that nature. And so I think we can be successful at again, mitigating some of these impacts and continuing, obviously, our program, delivering benefits for the state of Louisiana, but it certainly is having a significant impact on what we're doing and on how we're viewing things into the future. And then lastly, and this is not something that we want to do, and it's not something that we have had to do, certainly in the recent past, but there may come a time when it just doesn't make sense to award a bid. The cost may be so high that it makes sense to perhaps wait 3 or 6 months or so, see if the market adjusts, hopefully in the way or in our favor, and try to re-advertise the project to get a more favorable price at a time that may make more sense. So again, don't mean to end on a low note, but this is not new news to anybody. Again, we're all dealing with it, but I thought it was worth discussing kind of how it has impacted our coastal program, kind of how we're thinking about working through these issues and some of the potential solutions that we're thinking about to try to mitigate some of these impacts. So, Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation. I'm certainly happy to take any questions you may have.
Yep. Looks like Mr. Landry has a question or a comment.
Not a question, but a comment, I guess. Bryn talked about DOTD, and I just wanted to kind of support what Bryn was talking about with the cost overruns. What we're seeing at DOTD for the first 6 months of 2022, we've bid out 134 projects for about $750 million. We estimated about $686 million, so we're looking at $65 million increase for those 134 projects. That equates to about a 10% bump. Now, what Bryn was talking about with the 100%, that was focused on 7 major items that we deal with, like asphalt, concrete, excavation, those sorts of things. But the 10% overrun is kind of misleading because we're continually upgrading our estimates. So if we would have been looking at estimates from pre-pandemic to right now, what we're seeing in bids, we're easily 20 to 25% over our estimates from 2 years ago. So again, we're updating our estimates on a weekly, monthly basis, and we're still seeing a 10% increase over our estimates for the first 6 months of the year. And it doesn't just affect roads and bridges. We're involved with the Port Priority Program. We're seeing about a 20-25% increase as well, primarily with steel sheet pile. The cost of steel is going through the roof, and so affecting all of our programs at DOTD.
Thank you, Pat. Mr. Bourgeois.
Yeah, I mean, bad news for sure, but real news, right? We're seeing it clean across the board for everything we're doing too. And I guess the point is there's 2 points I wanted to make is that it's happening at an unprecedented rate, right? Because, and that's impacting our contractors, right? Our contractors are seeing, but from the time that they were awarded the bid to the time they're trying to execute, they're seeing that their costs have gone up tremendously. They're complaining, but it's a contract and we've got to deliver it. But that puts risk in the hands of the contractors. And when you put risk in front of the contractors, all your prices are going to go up in the future. In an organization like ours, we actually had a meeting yesterday where we do a mid-year budget adjustment for all of the things we're doing. And we, more than 90% of our expenditures every year go to construction contracts, into capital projects. It's typically even higher than that, except that we've got money that's been spent for IDA recovery type stuff this year. But when 90+% of your budget is now hitting a 25% impact, it makes it a very, very challenging thing. And my suggestion is that this is real. We're seeing these increases. When we consider moving forward, we really need to stick with the projects that already have the momentum. They have the momentum of design. They have the momentum of everything we're working on. And so going into the next funding round, I think that's going to have to take some priority over a whole bunch of new projects, which is unfortunately, we all like to keep moving into new, but we're seeing the same thing. We've had to stop moving in the new directions so that we can complete the things that we've got. And it's it's not popular, but we have been the same thing on our operation side. We've got 3 large marsh buggies that we operate, doing, maintenance issues all over the district, and fuel costs, the availability to move them, getting a truck just to move things can be difficult. So certainly understand, but those were the points I wanted to add to what you're saying.
Thank you.
Mr. Garrett?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To kind of piggyback on Mr. Bourgeois' comments and the reality that we're facing with these construction costs, are you aware of any current contracts where the contractors are exposed to this risk and these increased costs where they're just unable or unwilling to complete a project?
I'm not aware of that. We have had partners, not CPRA, but partners that we are aware that contractors have asked for fuel adjustment, for example. Mm-hmm. I don't think we've been asked for that yet, but we certainly anticipate that happening at some point in the future. But no, I'm not aware of anybody walking off a job, certainly not a CPRA job, because the costs are just out of hand.
That's good. That's good to hear. I do have a comment as well. I'm really excited about the work y'all are doing on Chapel Delta. You mentioned it is a heavily used area, and I think it's great for hunters, fishers, and outdoors people. So appreciate the work.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Garrett. Ms. Cormier.
Thank you for your presentation, Bren. And I just have a question about implementation. Obviously, it's terrible news, but I'm just curious about how in the future, if we have to pause on some of these contracts with the bigger projects, kind of piggybacking on what Dwayne said, are we considering maybe doing some smaller projects because we're in a coastal crisis, as everyone knows? So instead of pausing for like 6 months on everything, how is the decision? Are we thinking about making decisions to do smaller projects that may be a little bit more, but yet we're still putting construction projects on the ground? Are those discussions being talked about? And if so, if not, well, maybe we need to have those conversations. My point is, we're in a coastal crisis, so the pause of 6 months made the hair of my neck stand up, and I'm trying to decide, okay, we got to do something rather than nothing, even if it costs a little more to do a smaller project or 2 smaller projects as opposed to a massive one.
Yeah, and so the short answer to your question is yes, absolutely. We're considering those things, and that's how we are working right now and how we intend to work, into the future. The 6 months that I mentioned, I really pulled that out of the air. My staff behind me is probably cringing that I even threw a number out there. I was just suggesting that there may come a time when a bid comes in that's so outrageous or so over what we anticipate that there may not be another option other than to not award that bid, and that would cause a delay. Clearly, we're not about delay at CPRA. We do not want to delay anything, if at all possible. But you only have 2 options if cost goes up. That's scaling a project, right, and perhaps reducing some of what we can deliver, whether that's, again, an acre of marsh or maybe a mile of levee or however you might measure it. Or you try to find the money to implement the project as envisioned, and so Project X gets built, but then that obviously impacts Project Y that might be next in line. So either way you look at it, that ultimately reduces what we can deliver. But absolutely, we're not. I didn't mean to suggest, and hopefully I didn't, that we're considering pausing everything till things normalize. And we're going to continue to build projects. We're going to continue to deliver benefits, but this has an impact on what we can deliver.
Right. I just wanted a little clarification for you on that.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to clarify that.
I'll just say, Ms. Cormier, that would be the last option that we would consider would be on the table. And as Bren just laid out the 2 options, either scale the project or find the money. And the examples that Bren gave earlier when it came to Bayou Lafourche Freshwater District's pump station that came in at $96 million, we got those bids during the legislative session. So we were able to work with Representative Zarang, members of the legislature, to find the additional money so that Ben could actually award the bid for the pump station. When it came to Grand Isle, we were able to, go in within CPRA's money tree, shake a few dollars loose, and we were able to award that contract. But just to put this into perspective, members, is when you're talking about a barrier island project that is $150 million, when you're talking about a marsh creation project in Barataria or Breton or anywhere in South Louisiana that is in excess of $100 million. When you're talking about a sediment diversion that is billions of dollars, these are significant numbers. And so our first inclination, or at least my first inclination, is, well, where do we find the money? And that's either working with the administration or working with other BP funding streams to maneuver the chess pieces and overlay that with the sequencing of projects, as Dwayne was saying, which ones are most the low-hanging fruit that are construction ready, and then figure out how we're going to implement the other ones on the back end. But this is a significant issue that we're going to have to grapple with, and I just ask that Brent keep the board posted on some of these percentage increases on all projects in the coming months. Secretary Brown.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Bren, just for clarification, the Paradise Canal Gate you say is ready to operate?
It is not quite. It will be ready very soon, though. We anticipate construction completion within this month, by the end of the month.
And who operates that gate, CPRA or St. Charles Parish?
I believe that is, and Ms. Gorman, I might ask you for some help there. I believe that's a parish-operated gate. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Any questions? Always like the participation from the members. So that's good discussion. And any other questions or comments for Brent? I got your text, Ben. All right, Brent, thank you very much. Great update, and look forward to hearing from you next month.
Thank y'all.
Let's see. Moving on, members, to agenda item number 7. We're going to get an update on the South Central Coastal Flood Risk Reduction Plan by Ms. Alice Curl with the Corps of Engineers. An exciting announcement for South Central Louisiana.
Right. Can y'all hear me? Okay. Yes. Okay, there it is. All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Alice Curl. I'm a project manager with the Army Corps of Engineers. I am here to present an update on the South Central Coast Louisiana feasibility study. I know Mark Wingate and Colonel Murphy both wish they could be here, but they were tied up with other obligations today. So I'll be filling in, but I appreciate y'all having me. All right, so jumping into the study area, which consists of St. Martin, St. Mary, and Iberia parishes. The primary focus and purpose of this study would be to reduce risk from coastal storms such as hurricanes, tropical storms. This project has been fully federally funded under BBA 18, and the sponsors, of course, are CPRA. So, as you all know, the problems here in Louisiana being the hurricanes, tropical storms, sea level rise, subsidence, those are exactly what this study is catered towards. So, we have 3 objectives here, being reduce risk to life safety, reduce economic loss and damages, and as well enhance reliability of the primary evacuation routes. All right, so the recommended plan is 100% voluntary. We would be floodproofing or elevating 2,240 structures located within the 25-year storm surge floodplain. We would be elevating residential structures. We would be dry floodproofing commercial and public structures and wet floodproofing warehouses. The total project cost is $1.33 billion with a 20-year implementation period, and the benefit to cost ratio being 1.45. As you can see on the screen, this map, it illustrates those locations of the structures within the recommended plan. So here, the pink dots are those elevated structures up to 13 feet. The blue dots being the dry flood-proof structures up to 3 feet, and the yellow being the wet flood-proof structures those warehouses up to 12 feet. The good news I'm here to share is that the report has been signed by the Chief of Engineers, so the study has been approved. Up next will be the administration level review. And then once that review is complete, it'll be handed off to Congress next. All right, so now that the study's been approved, the next steps would be initiating PED, which is contingent upon funding. We consistently and continue to express the capability to get the design work started. But once funding is received, we can get started with working the design agreement and polishing up the implementation strategy with CPRA. After that would then be public outreach, where we would keep everyone informed and explain how to apply to participate. If you're familiar with the Southwest Coastal Study, we'll be taking a similar approach as them. And then, of course, construction, as in actually elevating these homes and flood-proofing businesses, will be contingent upon congressional authorization and appropriation. And that's what I have today. Happy to take any questions, comments.
You got a question, Z? Can you? Well, let's go to Ms. Cormier first, but I don't see your button, Z.
Thank you, Ms. Allison. Thank you, Chairman. Can you tell me a little bit about the decision as to, obviously there were some structural items in the pre-plan, and how it rolled down to just include the non-structural aspect of it? Is that a cost benefit?
Yes, it's based off of the cost benefit ratio. We have looked into all those measures earlier in the study, but ultimately when we refined the plan, this was the best option.
Okay. And so the cost benefit for the Southwest Coastal was a 5-to-1. Do you know what the cost benefit was on this one with just the non-structural?
For just the non-structural,
Yeah.
The plan I presented today was 1.45.
Okay. And with the structural involved, it obviously was below a 1?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. And do you have any idea what the average elevation cost is that you're estimating in there? Because yesterday I think I got an email that said for Southwest Coastal, it's like average at 100,000, which I haven't seen an elevation of $100,000 in years and years and years. And, you know, with all the increase in the 25% increase, I would assume that you guys are implementing those costs into these studies right now.
So I do not have that information in front of me today, but I believe when we get to PED, we'll have more answers on exactly what those costs would be once funding's received to start that effort. And I can follow up if I have anything in
Right.
the office for you.
Okay, that'd be great. And also, one other question. Last meeting, we learned that the Southwest Coastal might be handed off to Rock Island in New York. And I'm just wondering if you guys, is that a firm done deal that that's going to be taking place, or is it possible to have someone from Louisiana in the Corps of Engineers representing the homeowners and the citizens of Southwest Louisiana, as opposed to someone from New York coming in? And I think it would go much better with a representative from the New Orleans district, or even the Vicksburg district or another district, you know, a little to the south.
Yes, ma'am. I don't have a confirmed answer yet, but I will look into that and I'll take that note to my leadership. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Ms. Cormier, I'll just let you know that we're still waiting on a final answer on all of the IIJA projects. And so, yes, it seems like that these projects are going to be divvied up amongst the various districts across the country, but no final word on that just yet. Alice, you mentioned on slide 6 of your presentation that the South Central study will ultimately be transmitted to Congress for potential construction authorization. So the WRDA bill, where these projects are ultimately authorized for construction, has passed the House. I believe there is reference to the feasibility study in the Senate version. Do you have any update on the conversations that Corps Headquarters or Secretary Connor's office would be having with senators on getting this project in the Senate version of the WRDA bill?
So the goal, of course, is to be included in this 2022 WRDA bill. I have not heard anything as of late on what's happening with that, but that is the goal.
We just know we're pushing for that authorization on our end, and you know how these things go in D.C. is that these authorizing committees are going to then turn to Corps Headquarters and Mr. Connor's office, and so it would be helpful to have for us to be vertically aligned with the Corps of Engineers on this, because this is a big deal for South Central Louisiana, and I'd like to see it included in the WRDA bill.
Yes, sir.
All right, let's see here, Mr. Bourgeois. Hit your button again. You blinking?
How about that? Yeah. All right. Sorry. Thanks. Good presentation. Couple of thoughts looking forward and kind of revealing some of the secret sauce, because we all, compete for some federal funds, but, rising tide lifts all boats, right? So one of the questions and the things I think that we've done pretty good with, or are hoping to do well with some of our projects is comparison of the project or analysis of the project in the Council on Environmental Quality's climate and economic justice screening tool and the Justice 40 initiatives. Knowing what's on the ground in those areas and things of that, I would think that would help make a point to OMB when you do get around to funding. And I was just curious if there's a detailed analysis against those tools in your reports.
Environmental justice was, of course, considered, and working towards the implementation strategy and all that, it is all considered. But I think I think I'd have to be able to follow up with more details in order to give you everything you're looking for with that question.
Yeah, I just think that making sure that you do that in this case would put it in the best posture for getting funding under some of the priorities of this administration.
Yes, sir. Yes, thank you.
That's it, Dwayne?
Yep.
Let's see, Secretary Brown.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, looking at this program, of course, funding is next. I see it's voluntary. All of these projects will be grants, and is there any kind of match requirement?
A match requirement?
Yeah, just they give you $100,000 if you put up $10,000.
It would be funded on the government's end.
So it'll be 100% grants. Okay.
This if authorized in WRDA, it would be a 65-35. So where the federal government would be picking up 65% of the cost, we would be picking up 35% of the cost. So it would be typical, Secretary Brown, any federally authorized project that we are.
So there's some skin in the game.
Yes, that's right.
Thank you.
Any Ms. Goodson?
Yeah. Who administers this program? If it's 65-35, the state is putting up 35%. Who's administering the situation, dealing with the homeowners, the commercial businesses? What's the vision on that?
So all of this will be outlined, and just so the members are clear. So there's a chief's report on this. So we are one step closer to getting this thing authorized. So you got to go through the feasibility study. Then there's a chief's report, and then the project is authorized, and then you've got to go get funding for this. And so we are just got at the stage of having a chief's report signed. If authorized and there's funding, then there will be a project partnership agreement that is signed, and all of those details will be outlined in that agreement. But since it is a federally authorized project, the Corps of Engineers will be the lead agency on it. We will be the non-federal sponsor, similar to how we are on Morganza to the Gulf or Hysteris or any other federally authorized project. Does that answer your questions?
Yes. Thank you.
So it'll be a joint effort. And still a long ways to go.
Yes.
But a chief's report is a chief's report, and
Good news.
I'll take that all day. Yep. They are few and far between. That's right. Okay, Ms. Alice, thank you very much for being here today. I appreciate the update. I think the board was clear, members. We were good on that item? Mm-hmm. All right, moving on to agenda item number 8, Coastal Technical Assistance Center. Ms. Lacey Melanson, more commonly referred to as CTAC. I hope many of the private sector firms and businesses that are in the audience will pay very close attention to this, because we've been getting a lot of new blood, I'll say, from the private industry as a result of the IIJA funding, the emergency supplemental funding, $1.3 billion in state funding going to restoration and protection, and the private sector is wanting to know, how do you get in the game? How do you be a part of this? And so the CTAC Center was developed in partnership with LED and CPRA, and it's housed at Nicholls State University, where businesses and firms can go to learn more about how our process operates as far as contracts, advertisements, bids, et cetera, and Lacey is going to give us a quick update on that.
And thank you, Chairman Klein and members of the board. My name is Lacey Melanson, and I am the program director for the Coastal Technical Assistance Center. So I want to give you a brief history of how the program first began, and then we'll move into where we are now. So basically, CTAC was set up by CPRA and LED, as Chairman Klein mentioned, to serve as a technical assistance center to Louisiana businesses seeking opportunity in coastal restoration and recovery efforts, and to assist those businesses in obtaining contracts with prime contractors, as well as allowing, in turn, those coastal dollars to remain in the state. And part of what we're there to do is to provide assistance, training, and help businesses organize to be prepared to obtain those coastal contracts. So in looking back at year one, and this was all prior to my hire, the organizational development was structured, and basically as part of that, LED and CPRA has South Louisiana Economic Council, which is also known as SLEC, as our administering authority right now. So basically we are in the same facility as SLEC on the Nicholls State University campus, and they're assisting us with that process. Space and equipment was obtained and remodeled in the facility. The branding and online presence was conducted in that first year, as well as an economic impact study, which was completed by Camoin and Associates. And through that economic impact study, there were determining factors in what would best benefit businesses through the CTAC program. In addition, through that economic study, they provided us with a list of potential companies, about 2,100 companies in the state that could potentially benefit from our services. And I'll bring that up in just a minute again when we talk about our outreach. So in year two, I was hired in October of 2020, and initially we worked very closely with Nicholls State University, specifically their coastal program, in learning partnerships and what businesses were all involved, in addition to meeting with businesses that were already doing coastal work and local levee districts to get just feedback and input. And then we did a business needs assessment based on that, and from that determined what our program area goals and services would be. In year two as well, we also did research and implementation of some software to be able to track all of the communications that we have with businesses throughout the state. We also launched our website and social media in March of last year. And we established additional partnerships, and I did many presentations throughout the state. Unfortunately, a lot of those, I say unfortunately, We're virtual. Basically started this program in the beginning of, or at the end of 2020 during a pandemic, and then obviously you all are aware of the hurricanes the following year and then Ida last year. So it's moved slightly slower than I would have liked, but we're still in the area of establishing relationships throughout the state with chambers of commerce, economic development offices, and other partners to get the word out about the program. And some of those partner presentations, of course, those are all key components in getting information out about CTAC and connecting with businesses. So that brings us to year 3, and this is where the most of the work has been done. We launched our Become a Client campaign last year in July. During that initial launch, we reached out to about 1,500 companies that were provided in that list by that economic impact study. And then a few months later, we reached out to another 400 to 500 companies. Since then, we've reached out to basically every chamber of commerce in the state, in addition to all economic development offices in the state, again, to try to establish relationships, let people know that we're here, our services are free, and that we can benefit anyone interested in becoming part of any coastal projects happening throughout the state. While our main focus is projects offered through CPRA, we do also offer information regarding Army Corps of Engineers projects, Ducks Unlimited, levee districts, parish governments. We try to cover anything and everything coastal. And during our initial business assessment, that was one of the things that companies said they needed. It'd be great to have everything in one location, and that's what we've strived to do since then. So this is just a map showing that the outreach that we've done throughout the state. If this were in our live software system, I would be able to zoom in and see even more pins throughout the state to the businesses that we've contacted. We also launched our monthly newsletter last year, and our monthly newsletter has served to be kind of part of that centralized resource center in providing information about coastal projects happening throughout the state, as well as sharing news through CPRA's news releases and those sorts of things. So with regards to our services, as I mentioned, phase 1 of our services is being that centralized resource center. And through that, we try to provide as much information as possible with regards to coastal events, coastal projects, and anything happening related to that. We also provide through our phase 2 of business services, we provide information with regards to trainings and certifications happening with partner agencies throughout the state, specifically Small Business Administration, Small Business Development Centers throughout the state, any types of trainings or workshops that could benefit any of our clients with regards to certifications and trainings. As far as phase 3 for workforce development, we work closely with Louisiana Workforce Commission in addition to partnerships with universities and colleges throughout the state as part of just making sure that we're relaying the needs of the businesses. I know Bryn mentioned earlier, shortage in workforce and those sorts of things. We're seeing that from our perspective as well with working with these businesses. And then the trainings and certifications that I mentioned earlier. So in continuing to develop the program, of course, doing more presentations, continuing established partnerships and presentations throughout the state. And it's been great because each time I make a new connection, it seems there's 2 or 3 more. So those partnerships are definitely important. We established our advisory committee earlier this year, which includes representatives from different areas of all of the types of services we offer. And looking at goals moving forward, one of the things we're really excited about and hoping to launch within the upcoming weeks is our CTAC mobile app. And basically through that app, anyone will be able to download the app on their phone. There will be different user level permissions within the app. And through those user level permissions, if you're a partner, you'll have access to certain information. If you're a CTAC client, you'll have access to certain information. And then if you're just someone who wants to keep track of what coastal events are happening, you'll have just basic information through the app. So we're really excited to launch that, and there will be more added to the app as we continue to develop our services in the future. This is just another preview of what the app is going to look like. We'll, of course, include information about coastal projects and bids, and that will take them directly to the links of where those bids are located. And then as well as if someone just downloads the app and would like to become a CTAC client, they'll be able to do that through the app as well. We're going to continue with our statewide outreach, so if anyone has anyone they can connect me with, I would greatly appreciate it. We're looking to produce some video and photo assets, maybe of coastal projects, to do client spotlights as our clients are awarded these coastal projects and complete coastal projects. And just refine our process for business counseling services. Go through the process of having and hosting events. Greg and I spoke last week about the potential of hosting a matchmaking event between prime contractors and subcontractors, or subcontractors looking to work together maybe on different projects. And other goals include workforce development needs and, of course, co-hosting trainings and presentations with partner agencies. So in looking at our clients, as of Friday, we have 90 CTAC clients, and I just gave you a brief breakdown of those, the types, service type, contractor type, and then certifications of those clients. We have 34 clients identified in construction services, 50 professional services, and 6 companies that identify as both. By contractor type, 10 in prime contracting, 16 as subcontractors, and then 64 companies that consider both depending on the project size that they're looking at. And as far as certifications, 63 identify as small businesses, 39 of those are disadvantaged businesses, 4 is 8A, 3 is women-owned, 2 veteran-owned, 4 minority-owned, 14 in Hub Zone, and 1 Hudson. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention some of our other partners, in addition to LED, CPRA, and SELECT. But Nicholls State University has been key and very instrumental in assisting the program to get off the ground. The Water Institute of the Gulf, our sister company, Louisiana Procurement Technical Assistance Center, Ms. Cynthia Carrier has been a great partner, and the Army Corps of Engineers. So with that being said, that concludes my presentation, and I'm open to any questions or comments.
All right, Lacey, thank you very much. It's great to see this thing up and running, and quite frankly, it seems to be really firing on all cylinders, which is it's really a positive thing, I think, for the state. As I've mentioned in the last several meetings, Lacey, if you've been tuning in to these board meeting discussions, is that a lot of the guidelines, the regulations that are coming out of the Biden administration for Infrastructure Investment and Job Act, emergency supplemental funding, we're hearing a lot of talk about equity, environmental justice, DBEs, disadvantaged business enterprises, and things of that nature. And I would really like for CTAC to really pay attention to that, because we continue to hear from federal agencies and members of our congressional delegation that the Biden administration is going to be taking a very hard look at how some of these grant applications are submitted, the individuals that will be carrying out the work, the individuals that would be benefited from this work. And so if CTAC could just be mindful of the whole DBE discussion and how do you do outreach into those particular avenues, I think would serve CTAC well.
Absolutely.
Yep. Okay. Let's see, Mr. Bubrick for a question.
It's encouraging to see this. I participate in our local business association as a board member, and one of the things we continue to hear as feedback is the small businesses, we don't know about these things until they're other people coming in to do work. We could locally do it with our local companies. So I would like to put you in contact with the director of our business association so that we can plug you in, and this just give us another opportunity to say, hey guys, here it is. Please utilize it, because as you know, a lot of people tend to complain. They've got to try to help themselves at some point and get engaged and work through the process. But I think this is a great tool that can help them get engaged and in the process. So I would like to reach out to you and put you in touch with our director.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd be happy.
Ms. Gorman. Thank you, Mr. Bubrick.
Hey, thank you so much for your presentation. I had just recently seen your name, so one of my hats is Secretary of Association of Levee Boards of Louisiana. And I mean, this is invaluable. You made a reference. Is this a free service that is that's offered to various firms?
It's a free service. So basically any Louisiana-based business can sign up for our services. We do work with some of the companies out of state, headquartered out of state, but that's in partnership with trying to prime them with companies here in the state if they're looking to bid on some of our coastal projects.
All right, well, we will have you at our December meeting, so
Absolutely.
to present, because there will be a lot of people there who would be very interested in you putting out this information. And I'd like to talk to you after, because I mean, this is invaluable. This is incredible. So thank you very much for it.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.
All right, Ms. Corman, thank you. Mr. Bourgeois. Coming.
Just gotta wait. All right, yeah, just real quick. I mean, I think we met within weeks after you started a job, and it's just a compliment specifically to you and all of the efforts that you've made and how far you've advanced this since you started working with it. So, kudos to you.
Thank you.
Ms. Cormier.
I think you made reference to northern Louisiana, but it is throughout the entire state. So I know with COVID and everything, you probably hadn't been able to travel too much, but you are traveling at some point to northern parishes in Louisiana to give them information as well, correct?
So I have not traveled specifically
Yeah.
thus far, but we have done outreach to northern parts of the state. While our focus more so has been on some of the coastal parishes,
Right.
we're still doing outreach throughout the state. I know that LED is working right now on, and Mr. Whitty could probably comment more to this, but on a hub to be accessible for all any state business of all the services available throughout the state.
Right.
So we've recently signed up for that to be on that hub, and we're just continuing to do outreach specific to the needs of what some of our prime contractors are looking for, and that's searching state databases and different resources we have, in addition to working with Louisiana PTAC,
Right.
because they can provide us with business contacts as well.
Well, I think this is a great program, and I'm so grateful for it. I just think that we could combine maybe some road trips with some CPRA people, because it's really important to let the northern Louisiana parishes understand how important coastal Louisiana is in the future for any kind of tax funding we might need for coastal Louisiana, because they are a part of our state, and we need to engage them as much as we can and educate them that Louisiana is a coastal, state, and that's important. So I'm so grateful for this program, but I encourage every one of us to reach out to our northern parishes and let them also understand how important coastal Louisiana is.
And I'd be happy to attend. If anyone can provide me with connections, I'd be happy to attend and do, the northern part of the state over a week or so, and just kind of make some presentations up there.
That's great.
All right, thank you, Ms. Cormier. Any other questions for Ms. Melanson? All right, the board is clear. Thank you. Moving on, we're going to get a briefing on Neptune Pass, members, which has been in the news recently, where the Mississippi River has made a new cut. We're going to get an update on that. By Dr. Alicia Renfro with Lumcon.
So I'm with the National Wildlife Federation. Alexander Kolker from Lumcon was going to present today, but unfortunately he couldn't make it, so he asked me to present in his stead. So hopefully I will do it justice. So this is the location of Neptune Pass. It's pretty far down the river. As you can see, down here we have the head of passes. And then we have Fort St. Philip, which is a crevasse that opened up in 1973. So this particular pass is between Ostraca and Fort St. Philip. Okay. So this is what it looked like from the air, July 19th of 2021. This was a flyover we did with South Wings. And this is what the pass looked like then. You can see it looks pretty broad. To the on the side here to the left, we have Bay Denise, and then we have some marsh over here. And this is in contrast to Mardi Gras Pass, which you all have probably heard something about. This is a pass that opened up and connected fully with the river in 2012, and you can see how small it is in comparison to that Neptune Pass. So this pass, Neptune Pass, has been around for a long period of time. I don't know exactly how long, looking back at the satellite imagery. It's definitely since the 80s at the very least. But this is what it looked like back in 2016. You can see it's a fairly narrow pass. You can actually see maybe there are some rocks along the front entrance here that the Army Corps put down to control water going through that area. And this is what it looked like in 2021. So it has expanded significantly. You can see that the rocks, for the most part, have seemed to disappear. The channel has widened quite a bit. So this was, something of interest and concern. What's going on here? How much it's expanded? How much discharge is going through now? And so NWF actually provided some funding to Alex Kolker and Dallin Weathers to look at the discharge through this Neptune Pass to understand how it's changed over time and how much discharge is moving through there right now. So the goals of this research is to understand how much water is moving through the pass currently, compare that to some earlier studies in the region to see how much that has changed. Also do some mapping of the bottom along that channel to understand what that bottom looks like, to understand maybe a little bit why this has happened and what we might expect in the future. And then also to examine satellite images to try and kind of gauge the regional changes and land formations we might expect from this pass. So this is the research that was conducted as part of this study. There was a discharge survey in May 24th of 2022, and then some more study in June of 2022, including some of the bathymetric surveys looking at the bottom structure. So this is a map of what the bottom looks like in this particular pass now. So one thing you'll notice here, we have the Mississippi River. You have this really deep blue hole that is right there at the intersection between Neptune Pass and the Mississippi River. Well, this is in meters, so it's 30 meters deep, which is about 100 feet deep. So this is a deep blue hole that's developed. This is pretty common. As many of these passes have expanded, you kind of see this hole forming again and again. Then the channel shallows up, and then you have a deeper section of the channel here, and then it goes into Quarantine Bay, which is fairly shallow. And this is kind of like a sort of bird's eye view, looking from the river into this, and you can see again like that deep blue hole. You can see the entrance, how it's kind of eroded on the downstream end of this hole, and you can also see I think that he has actually had animations. Yeah, there we go. So you see the scour hole itself, and then you see how steep these channel walls are. And so this is putting that data with some data from the Army Corps of Engineers looking at the bottom structures along the Mississippi River. And you see there seems to be some movement of sand potentially right here. But the big thing is to see like how much you have that downriver hole that's kind of starting to lower and perhaps could connect to the Mississippi River more fully. And then this is looking down that kind of deeper part of the channel that goes into Quarantine Bay. So you can see the kind of canyon look there and how much water is going through. Okay, so this didn't quite, this flipped over wrong. But the big thing to keep in mind here is that this whole scour hole here represents about 500,000 cubic meters of sediment, which is around 670,000 cubic feet of sediment. Okay. So in the May 2022 discharge survey, not only did they look at Neptune Pass, but they did also measure the Fort St. Philip area as well. And this is in comparison to a 2016, there was a 2016 survey that was done in this same area. So they started here in the upriver portion, and then the survey ended there. And you can see just how many passes there are and connections there are between the Mississippi River and the east side of the river in this location. So here's a bunch of numbers for you to look at, but the big thing to keep in mind are these things that are circled here. When the river discharge at Belle Chase was around 770,000 cubic feet per second, They have it labeled Bayou Tortillon here. There was a debate about what we call it. But Neptune Pass was 118,000 cubic feet per second. So it's pretty significant discharge moving through there. Prior years, it was probably more along the lines of 15 to 20,000 cubic feet per second. So it has expanded considerably. And so there is a lot of water exiting the river on this in this general area along the river. About 30% of the river is escaping through that eastern side at this time. So one of the things that we can see from satellite images is that we do, we have Quarantine Bay here. There is a lot of shallow water in this area, and we actually see emerging mouth bars looking at some of the satellite imagery. Right now, we're kind of coming off of a high river event, and so as the water continues to drop, we might get a better view of what that looks like over time. But we do seem to see land growth in this area. And then this is from December of 2021, where water was a little bit lower. So a year before, we do see these bars and kind of that delta that's forming. And this, it's a little pixelated, but and this really just kind of emphasizes the fact that you do see this kind of plume of sediment coming out of the river during that high river event that we're just coming off of. So you do have a lot of sediment moving onto that eastern side of the river. And again, you see some of these features that are building off of that east side of the river as the river interacts with the basin. Okay, so the findings and discussion points around this. So Neptune Pass has developed and expanded considerably somewhere between 2019 and 2021. Likely during some of the long river floods we had in 2019, it lasted for about 7 months, and so you continue to have high water pass through that area. Some of the rocks might have failed or shifted with some of that high discharge, allowing the channel to expand. It's currently, the pass is carrying about 15% of the Mississippi River discharge compared at Belle Chase. And that whole region upstream is carrying a lot of the river. You're losing about 30% of the river out of that east side, that low down in the river. So we don't quite know exactly why this is happening total. Multiple high river year events is likely a big cause. You could have the degrading infrastructure from the rocks. I would tend to say it's probably the high river events, hurricane impacts, and then there's this idea of deltaic backstepping, which is as sea level rises, the river kind of becomes inefficient. It's kind of pushing against the rising sea level, and so it starts to move out of these passes higher and higher up the river. But one thing that we do see is we see the development of mouth bars in Quarantine Bay, suggesting that there is potential land development that is associated with this pass. So one of the questions really is whether these islands actually represent new deltaic land, or is it simply a redistribution of sediment from the eroding channel that can be investigated through further studies, particularly looking at mass balance. The big question is this new sediment actually getting through this pass that's building land, or are we just moving that sediment that's been eroded into this area? And that's a really important question. This far in the low part of the river, it's a sediment poor area. There's a reason why the Mid-Barataria and Mid-Breton sediment diversions are located much farther up the river. You have more sediment available, the conditions are more favorable, lower subsidence rates. You have sandbars that can actually, lift sediment up when the river is high that you can capture. This part of the river, a lot of the sand has already been deposited in the channel, so it's mostly fine sediment. So I think one of the big questions is, are we actually getting new sediment through this pass to build land? I think it's a really important question that we want to tackle moving forward. Okay. So, at the end, this NWF actually provided funding for this research. South Wings provided some overflights so we can kind of scope out the region and see what was happening. And we continue to kind of have these conversations and figure out what the next steps are for this particular pass. And with that, I'm complete. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Dr. Renfro. I'll just let the members know that we had a meeting at DOTD, I believe it was last Friday, with Navigation Interest Corps of Engineers on this particular pass. And the Corps of Engineers has made it clear that there is a navigation impact. And so in our mind, we're going to be working with the Corps of Engineers to make sure that we strike the right balance on overall restoration needs of the area, but also taking into account the navigation needs of maintaining the channel and the flow and things of that nature. So the Corps is going to be taking some action. with some rocks, which will allow for some title exchange, if you will, or similar to what we see now, but to where not that much velocity is going through the pass. And so we'll probably be bringing the Corps of Engineers back once they have a final plan and what the scope and scale of it looks like. But I appreciate you being here, Doctor, for the update. Do we have any questions for Alicia? Yes, we do. Mr. Boobrigg.
Is there a shoaling issue? Is it a river issue? Is it are the shipping industry concerned that the amount of flow that we're losing is going to change and is currently changing, and sandbars are being built further down river below it? Is that the reason this whole thing came to fruition?
Yeah, so, the Army Corps of Engineers is always concerned that there's going to be increased need for dredging in the river. They don't seem to be that concerned. See dredging around, so that's their big concern. How do they they don't want to overly manage this, but they also want to make sure that they're not bringing up their dredging budgets any more than they have to.
Thank you.
I heard a button click. Ms. Gautreaux. There we go.
Yes, thank you, Alicia. I thought that was a very helpful presentation. I'm wondering, in conversations with the scientists that are ongoing, is there actually an active plan to do that mass balance study? Because it seems like it would be really good as we're looking at the kind of emergency actions to have that information to consider as we're moving forward. And I think Chairman Klein mentioned that as well. We have to balance the restoration needs, but is something in line maybe to go forward?
Yeah, I believe Alex is working on putting together a proposal for that now, and we'll figure out how to get it funded and moving forward. I think that is of interest, not only to us here in Louisiana, but the Corps also seems to be interested in that, as well as they try and figure out how they manage this moving forward.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Gautreaux. All right, Dr. Winfro, looks like the board is clear. I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 10, we're going to get a update on the Restoration Partnership Program, a very popular program for CPRA over the last several years. And we're going to hear from Mr. Kent Bolfrass with CPRA.
All right, good morning, everybody. Everybody hear me? Okay. Restoration Partnership Fund, Conservation Restoration Partnership Fund. This is going to be the latest iteration of that. The fiscal year 23 request for proposals is going to be announced by me right now. So I'm Kent Bolfrass, Planning and Research at CPRA, and I administer this program along with a lot of help from others at the agency. It's got a pretty robust history at this point. Since 2008, we've done 37 projects across the coast with a whole bunch of various entities, and between the $11+ million that the state has provided and the $15+ million that our partners have brought to the table, we've got somewhere in the neighborhood of $27 million of on-the-ground restoration since the program's inception. So the RFP for this year, we again have $1 million to match with our partnering entities. So those funds are to leverage, our broader pool of funding for coastal restoration and for our partners to bring additional funds to the table. And then, the flip side of that is our partners get to recognize their goals as well. They get to either upsize a project that they've already got going, or they get that last little bit of funding they need to actually implement a project. So all these proposals will be evaluated by scientists and engineers at CPRA, and they're going to be evaluated on these 5 criteria up here. We've got consistency with the master plan, the amount and type of habitat that's going to be restored, synergy with other efforts in the area, the likelihood of constructability, as well as the type and amount of matching funds. And this program, it's got a pretty broad reach at this point, and not just to recognize the accomplishments of our partners and the program itself, but this is sort of to frame what types of projects we're looking for and the scope and scale of the projects that might be proposed. So just from last year's program iteration, FY22 Partnership Fund, we put projects, or are going to put projects, in 5 parishes across the coast, from Cameron to St. Tammany and a few in between. Those projects are relatively diverse in the types of habitat that they restore. We've got oyster reef, we've got vegetative plantings, we have a coastal forest conservation project, terracing in both salt marsh and brackish marsh, as well as some fresh marsh habitats as well. And then, we always get these questions: how much should we ask for? How much can we ask for? There's no set rule to that. Of course, we have $1 million. You can't ask for more than that. But we've got awards anywhere from kind of on the low end of $25,000 last year to about $300,000 to $400,000. So that's typical, and everything in between. But as long as you're not asking for more than $1 million, we can consider funding you. And then our partners, this is, again, kudos to them. They brought over $3 million of match to implement their projects. So for our $1 million, they're bringing $3 million. Actually, it's north of $3 million. And those match types can be their own, can come from their own coffers. That can be grants that they're bringing in from other funding sources. We get work in kind match and everything. So last point I'll make here is we partnered with 6 different entities last time. So we do try to spread these monies around. So our timeline and requirements for the proposals. So we've got 3 months for the RFP, where we're going to ask that you submit the proposals by October 21st of this year. And while that seems like a short timeline, that's actually an extra month than we typically give, just to make sure we're getting the most robust set of proposals we can. But we don't ask that much of our partners in terms of a proposal. It's a 2 to 3 page, give or take, proposal. It's what you want to do, where you want to do it, how much match you're asking from us, the program, and then how much match and what type of match you're bringing to the table. And you can do that in 2 to 3 pages, and that lowers the burden on them. It lowers the burden on us, so we can actually get these things to fruition more quickly. And so, again, we would like our partners to submit the proposals by October 21st, 2022. We intend to notify everybody of the awards by November 18th. And, we hope to then notify the board sometime thereafter, either, December or January, whenever the next board meeting might be. I've gone over a lot really quick, and I didn't give a ton of specifics, but you can find the RFP on our website, our social media. We are notifying other media outlets via a media blast. You can contact me directly. I also have hard copies, so I'll be hanging out at the back of the room for a while. You guys can come ask questions of me, or just take that sheet of paper and call me back with questions later. So again, it's exciting to be able to administer this program any year we get funding. We're lucky enough to have funding again in fiscal year 23, and again, contact me or contact my staff with questions. And if you've got a project in the coastal zone that fits, within the scope of this program, by all means, submit it.
All right, thank you, Kent. A lot of good things to show for this program. So a lot of interest across the coast over this, and I appreciate the update. It looks like the board is clear, and I know you'll be back briefing us on the submissions and the overall selections. So thank you very much for being here.
Indeed, thank you.
And once again, today, members, our caboose is Mr. Neil McMillan, who's going to give us an update on IIJA and some of the things that we're working at the congressional level.
Good morning, board, and thank you, Mr. Haas, for the sound effects with the caboose. That's really appreciated. Good thing, no microphone nearby. Last month, Chairman Klein asked for some greater granularity on timing, and so that's the focus of my presentation. So we'll begin with NOAA, which on June 29th, Secretary of Commerce Gina Raimondo and NOAA Administrator Dr. Rick Spinrad announced how they're going to spend their $2.96 billion in IIJ funding and really launch their efforts. And so there's several programs that we've mentioned before. I just wanted to share where they are in the game. I'll start with the habitat restoration grants, as they seem most closely aligned with our mission. Congress gave $491 million, and they're going to try to announce the opportunity and award the opportunity in this quarter. There's $85 million available for transformational habitat restoration and coastal resilience grants. It's a $1 million to $15 million range. They've also been willing to expend this over 2 years, so they may say, we'll give you half this year, half the next year. So that's a really big opportunity, the largest NOAA opportunity. So I'm sure we're looking at it. And there's also $10 million available this year for underserved communities for habitat restoration or coastal resilience. It's a smaller range, kind of like Mr. Bolfrass's range, and so that's a great opportunity, and definitely direct people to that. A little quicker through these, coastal zone management, which is run by the states. We're working with our state partners. Letters of intent are due at the end of this month, but the state agencies have been working well on that, and we have some good ideas. And I'll flag Fish Passage very briefly. It's in several different locations. I know there's some coastal zone stakeholders who have some different interests. With our anadromous species, we're eligible, but you can see that there from NOAA's point of view. Marine debris, there's two opportunities that are of interest. There's a removal and cleanup, so addressing existing legacy debris, preventing future debris. I guess the practical side, that's a little larger. There's a 1-to-1 cost ratio. Proposals due at the end of September for that. And then there's also a research component that's going to be run through Sea Grant. There's 2 different prize competitions, and your letter of intent is due early in August with full application due at the end of September. So certainly applicable. And then two opportunities that are not available for just anybody to apply for a grant, but are worth flagging. The Regional Ocean Partnership funding, which the Gulf of Mexico Alliance is kind of our regions, will get some money, non-competitive, about $1.9 million a year. Most of that will go to dealing with climate crisis issues, and some will be also used for data sharing. So where you have relationships and ideas with that group, that's probably go direct to the source. And there's also $492 million in flood inundation mapping, forecasting, water modeling, a bunch of the heavy science on the water management. We were kind of interested to see if there was going to be some extramural opportunities. At this time, NOAA is saying it's going to be intramurally done, or done internally. Excuse me. With Department of Interior, we mentioned previously the American the Beautiful Challenge for voluntary restoration. This brings in interior money, but as well as USDA, Forest Service, DOD. The initial request for proposals is due tomorrow, so start editing your proposal. And there's also a rolling National Fish Passage Program opportunity. That type of program, there's no real set deadline, so start engaging as soon as possible. FEMA, I'm sure a lot of y'all are focused on this from your parish, your locality region. The BRIC and Flood Mitigation Assistance Program, which are also Justice 40 programs. They're going to announce something in the fall. But this Storm Act Revolving Loan Fund capitalization grant that we've heard from before, they're looking into late next year to start that up. Not too much information on the EPA geographic programs. We have a TBD right now on our information on when this will get started. But both of these programs have kind of comprehensive plans, and the projects are going to align with that. We'll certainly keep looking for more information there. USDA's pretty advanced in their watershed programs. They've made 2 announcements early in the year, but it seems that there's about $331 million remaining. I bet a lot of that will go to implementing some of the projects they've been studying. But we heard from Louisiana NRCS that there's 9 projects in Louisiana that are undergoing this preliminary investigation and feasibility stage. By my count, there's about 4 in the coastal region. So that's good, but they're like the fish passage, they're always available to talk and bring your project up. And then doing some math on the Army Corps funding. Army Corps funding was a little different than a lot of the IIJA funding in that they wanted to spend it in the first 3 fiscal years to really address the existing backlog. Most of the other projects were over 5 years. So there's 1 more fiscal year remaining, not been announced, FY24. As you'll see, here's kind of my basic math numbers of what's remaining. There's about $2.6 billion in construction, $1 billion for O&M, and then the investigations, MR&T, and FCC are kind of all allocated. Though I am noting that there is $30 million unspecified for pilot projects for disadvantaged communities. If you kind of do standard cost sharing there, that's probably I think about 15 projects. So it's conceivable that's another opportunity for an investigation. And with that, those are kind of the timing updates, and happy to answer questions.
All right, thank you, Neil, for the update. Members, I would just ask that if you have good working relationships with your parish governing authorities, your parish presidents, that you share this information with them, because it's likely going to be the parishes that are going to making these grant applications. I'd also ask to make sure that we get Russell this presentation. Russell, let's just make sure parish presidents across the coast have all of this information. I think this is very valuable on the timing, cost share requirements, and things of that nature as it relates to these opportunities. So looks like we got a couple questions. Neil, Mr. Bourgeois, and then Ms. Gorman, you'll be next.
Yeah, a good presentation, Neil, and I agree, Chip. That's a good point. The parishes need to do that. I know this was not on your presentation today because it really was in flux until just like yesterday. But could you make a comment about Go Mesa and the good news yesterday on the RISE Act?
Sure. There's a couple different things. When it comes to the RISE Act that you mentioned, Mr. Bourgeois, we as in the bill sponsors have that bill on the Senate Energy and Natural Resources markup list for this Thursday morning, 9 a.m. Central. So that's great news. There's an agreement between the bill sponsors and Chairman Manchin and Ranking Member Barrasso. Some of the changes from the introduced version, from the GOMESA point of view, it's a cap removal, a clarification on eligible uses that you can't just do a GOMESA project for only entertainment purposes. So tone down the fun with your GOMESA. And there's also some reporting requirements, but importantly, the funds, once allocated to the state, can't be taken away and just put into the general treasury, so they still kind of are branded your funds. It has the wind revenue sharing component largely intact, and also it has a provision waives an administrative fee for inland states, so we're gaining some support from western states there. Some numbers that we've gotten from Dr. Stephen Barnes of the Blanco Center show that just the cap lift would be an additional 1.9 billion over 10 years from FY23 to 32 for Louisiana, 1.2 for Texas billion, 660 million for Mississippi, 610 million for Alabama. That's based off if the standard percentage is held, which for Louisiana is about 44%. So, there's many other ways we could gain more benefit from GOMESA, and the markup certainly does not put us on the finish line, but it's a massive hurdle in an election year to be vetted and ready for final passage. Then you'll also probably see that the House will introduce a bill called the Breeze Act that proposes some similar reforms. It seems like today folks want to do things on the same week right after a board meeting. So thank you for the question, Mr. Bourgeois, and
Thanks,
I think good news all around on that front.
Yeah, so Mr. Bourgeois, we had intended to hit that at the end of the presentation, but we appreciate the softball there. And so I'm not going to tone down the fun when it comes to my excitement for this actually happening. I tend to use a few more exclamation points in my comments than Neil does. Anybody knows who gets an email from me, I usually use exclamation points at some point in time during that email, but everybody who has been tracking this issue over the last several years, there's been multiple trips to Washington, D.C. with the Go Mesa Revenue Sharing Coalition. We just got back, I believe, sometime in June time frame. We had 60 to 70 people up there with us. We hit Capitol Hill. And everybody who has been tracking this issue knows that the one issue with moving this bill down the field was getting it on the markup calendar. And we had an issue with one Gulf Coast senator who was, and I certainly respect what she was trying to do, is that there were three things that the original bill did. It increased the percentage, it increased the number of leases that were eligible for the revenue sharing, and it eliminated the cap. Senator Manchin, who is the chairman of the committee, had made it clear, he says, I do not favor increasing the percentage or increasing the number of leases. However, I am in favor of eliminating the cap. As Neil just outlined, our economic forecasting that was done by Dr. Barnes at the Blanco Institute, that's a big damn deal to eliminate the cap. I mean, there's significant funding would be coming to the state of Louisiana by eliminating that cap. And so while I understand why that particular Gulf Coast senator was fighting for everything that she could potentially get, but we were able to work the issue through Senator Cassidy, through our counterparts in Mississippi. The governor made several calls to Governor Reeves, Senator Manchin. We were on the phone with the Secretary of State, with our counterparts in the Marine Resources. And to have this bill actually marked up in committee, finally, I mean, this is where the fight is. There's a lot of more work to do on this, but to have it actually marked up, hopefully with a favorable vote in committee, we'll actually vote on it by the full Senate. It's just been a long time coming. And so just thanks for everybody going to D.C., continuing to make this push, because everybody in this room benefits from Go Mesa funding. It's one lump sum. It comes directly into our trust fund. And then the opportunity that we're working with Governor Edwards on, with Z on wind energy, and the fact that that could be going to coastal restoration projects, hurricane protection projects is a great thing. So if Mark Schlefstein is listening to this, I hope to see an article in the paper on this very soon. Let's see, Ms. Gorman for a question.
No, actually, it's not a question. It's more of a comment. I'm going to call you down, Neil, because I have a sincere respect for you. You give this information to the board, and I just want the members to know that I utilized Neil. I called him a couple of weeks ago because I said my levy district has a member of nine members, and they had some questions regarding the IIJA, and so under a grants committee, I asked Neil just a week in advance, can you come and present to my board? And I mean, truly, you gave a presentation that was just great. It answered all the questions that they had, but your dry sense of humor and your sense of, I mean, it was just you came after hours. It's a big deal. And for those of you who do not utilize this gentleman, he is a wealth of information, and I just wanted to thank you in front of all these board members and for everybody here. You're a tremendous resource, and to people who don't utilize him, you should, because the information that he just spits out is just incredible. I don't have to go looking for it. I don't have to go searching for it.
Now ask for a raise. And
so anyway, thank you.
Yeah, I heard things are about 25% more expensive.
I just wanted to say thanks. I mean, again, it was a big deal to me, and thank you for that. So
well, I would second those comments, Monica. He is a coastal asset. There's an inside joke on that, but he is a true asset to our office, and he does incredible work. So
great, and happy to.
You just need to leave the table now.
Happy to share.
I mean,
so.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I'm dismissed.
Two other updates, and I can do this without Neil at the table. We received word, and Mr. Bubrig, I think this is important for your area of the state, as you're familiar with, the New Orleans to Venice Hurricane Risk Reduction System got an additional $783 million in the emergency supplemental that was passed by Congress. It was our interpretation that project was 100% federal. You remember the initial allocation for NOV was 100% federal. Corps of Engineers, attorneys at the headquarters level latched on to one particular provision in the bill. We've been going back and forth. They had initially said there could potentially be a 35% cost share on NOV. And so if you're looking at 35% on a $783 million, that's a significant. We received word at the end of last week that NOV is in fact 100% federal and that there will not be a cost share required from the state. And then secondly, a quick update on Grand Isle that the Corps of Engineers was able to get a restoration plan, and this is not the full-blown restoration plan. This is not the long-term plan for Grand Isle, but it's a plan to address impacts on the island from Hurricane Ida of $122 million. And so the Corps of Engineers will be working on that effort very, very soon. I believe there's some emergency work that's being done now, but that's really, really good news on both fronts, on NOV and Grand Isle, and RISE Act, and all of the information that Neil just outlined. Okay, I've got one public comment card from Mr. Roderick Scott, who wants to make a public comment on the South Central Core project.
Good morning, Chairman and the board. Thanks for all of your efforts. I'm Rod Scott. I'm from Mandeville, Louisiana, 86% flood hazard mitigated now. After a 9-foot surge in Ida, we were back in business in a week. We only had 59 flooded buildings this time. So just tremendous work that my community is doing. I am the board chairman of the Flood Mitigation Industry Association. We've created, I spoke with you back 2-3 meetings ago about the Storm Act. We passed our Resilient Revolving Loan, one of 3 states in the union. So we are in the front row for receiving the first $100 million as a startup funding for that. And we're in regular contact with headquarters at FEMA a lot with their mitigation staff. So we're really excited about the rules rollout and getting that in here because we can use that for core projects and other projects for match. We got to borrow it, but it's another source of funding for us. I want to talk about the South Central project. We were intimately involved with that project. I spent 2 weeks down there on the port. This is the U.S. first wet flood proofing project. This is going to be the model for other ports in this country. We have over 400 ports in this country. We're extremely vulnerable in our ports in this country to storms and sea level rise, as we saw with Fushan after Ida. And they could use a lot of resilience work down there, but we'll wait and see how interested they are in the future. But this is monumental. We're going to wet flood-proof port buildings. That port is wide open for the wind industry because of the unoccupied buildings and the downturn in the oil industry in that area. Lots of jobs. We're going to do 158 buildings wet flood-proofed, and then we're going to do a whole bunch of structures, elevate and dry flood-proof. We are the industry that does that work. We want to interface more with our state government and our federal government to get that authorization for funding and get that funding on the deck. We don't have 20 years. Flood insurance and wind insurance is going to chase us off our coast. And we have got to get these buildings retrofitted because they produce the revenues and the cost benefit for all our other projects. So buildings are critical. We are one of 3 pilot projects. The Montauk to Fire Island, Long Island, has 4,000 funded. We have 4,000 authorized in the Western project and only have 700 after 12 years of waiting. We need to fix that. We think that our industry, in concert with you and your coalitions, going to D.C. is very powerful. We create jobs in all of the trades. We create professional resilience occupations. And we're going to have a big announcement probably in the next month with some negotiations we're working with the state right now to create the world's first resilience academy, where we're teaching our workforce how to do these buildings. And we might as well do it in my home state. So the other big one is Norfolk. They had their plan approved 2 years ago. They already got money for 1,000 buildings in 2 years. We need to be doing that kind of fundraising. And we're here to help work with you all to go to DC to talk about this economic side of it, which is the properties, the workforce. And so we're really excited, and we look forward to your leadership carrying us forward with these projects, and let's get them funded. And I'll be out in your district in a couple of weeks meeting with the state senators out there. I'm very excited.
Right. Well, thank you, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Scott, for
Thank
being
you.
here. Do we have any other comments from the public? All right. If not, I've got a motion by Ms. Cormier, a second by Mr. Bourgeois to adjourn. Thank you all for being here today. Man, 11:15.